All right, welcome back. We are MDEV1004 Mobile APIs and Frameworks in the summer 2023 semester at Georgain, and it's week 1, part 3 of our broadcast and recording together. And in this part, we're actually going to do have more discussions around how to set up everything else that I need you guys to set up. And we're just way down here. I know I've been kind of doing a lot of setup today and discussion about what an API is, those kind of things. We're way back here at installing NVM and Node.js. So what is NVM and why do I like to use it as opposed to downloading directly? So one way of getting Node.js is actually going up here and going to nodejs.org, right? And nodejs.org, current version is 20. I'm sure you don't have 20 installed on your system, guaranteed, right? And you're like, okay, maybe you have the LTS version, or maybe you have something else, right? The problem is, like I said earlier, Node.js updates their stuff like weekly, right? So what if you wanted to get the latest release? We're going to use the latest release because we're going to do every single time. And to do this, we need to keep track of stuff. So in my command line, right, if I was to go do something like node ---- version, try this out, node ---- version. You see that my node version is 19.1. I don't want to use 19.1. I want to use the latest release, right? So a couple of things we can do. We can uninstall node, reinstall node, right? But what if I have a customer that uses an older version, like version 16, right? Or version 14, and I'm using version 19. Do I have to uninstall my version 19 and install his version 16? That's crazy. That's nuts. You have to uninstall that stuff. It's terrible. So we don't use that. We use something called a node version manager. So if you look at NVM, and if you look at the node version manager, there is a GitHub repository for it, and it's something that you need to do on your own. So it talks about how to do it, installing and updating. There's a way of doing it. Now, one thing it tells you is, please uninstall all older versions of Node. So first thing you need to do is, please uninstall your Node. Go through and uninstall your Node now for your Mac, all right, or your Windows machine. And there's different ways of doing that, depending on how you loaded your node in to your Mac, right? So again, a couple ways of loading into a Mac are homebrew, right? So if you looked at homebrew, you know, Node.js install, right? Then that is definitely another way of using, you know, kind of an installation procedure to install Node on your Mac. Great way when you use homebrew, because homebrew is another type of package manager in many ways. Right? It removes the requirement for you to use sudo in any of your commands. If I was doing npm or whatever, it often will ask you to use sudo commands. You don't have to do that if you use homebrew, right? So maybe you've installed it with homebrew. However you've done it, you need to uninstall it for Node NVM to work. Okay, now you don't have to do this today here in class, but I recommend it. You need to uninstall it. Next, once you uninstall it, you're going to run this install script. All right, the install script is a curl script that you can run. This is the one you want to run here on your Mac, and because wget won't work for you, most likely. And then what you do is once you have this, then it's going to install NVM for you. It's going to do all the installation work for you. What the heck does NVM do for us, right? What it does is it allows us to do an NVM command on the command line. So here on the terminal or command line, I can run something called NVM, right? An NVM, I can do an NVM list, and I can say, let's list my currently installed version, NVM, right? Now this is on Windows. Windows requires a different link. For those people who are Windows users, you need to do NVM install for Windows. And if you do that, you're going to see that there's a version up here where there's an NVM installation guide, and what it'll do is it'll take you to a website to install. Okay, so that's what it does. Right, here it is, this NVM Windows repository right here. And I'm going to populate these links here on Blackboard. So this is the NVM Windows installation. It's literally an executable you download, which I may do in a second. Here I'm just going to go here, and I'm going to go to web link, and this is the NVM Windows install. NVM Windows install link. That's what that is. And there's also going to be another install link here. This is the regular NVM installation. All right, so this is NVM installation for everyone else. Just make sure I go to the right. That's good. Okay, so again, this is part of your in-class exercise. I want you to demonstrate this. So NVM installation link. Everyone else, which means Max. Okay, just in case you're a Windows user or Mac, there it is. All right. Follow the installation instructions, please. And then what you should, this is the test, what you want to do, okay? You want to go to your command line and then type in NVM list. If you can do NVM list and it'll show you anything that's installed, it may show you nothing if there's nothing installed. But it should work, it should not error out. If it gives you an error, it means somehow it hasn't been installed properly, okay? So that's what you have to do. Now for me, one thing to notice, if I go NVM itself, it says I can do an NVM install, okay? And NVM install says I can do something like NVM install latest, or I can do NVM install 20.0.1, or whatever I want, whatever version I want, I can install, okay? So it's kind of like a node manager in many ways. It manages your installs. It also manages your NPM installs, right, which is kind of interesting. And it keeps them in separate buckets, right, so that way they don't clash with each other. You can always switch from one node installation to another, which is very useful. But if I try to do it like this with my current version of NVM, if I do something like NVM version, minus version, so I can do that too, right? Do that NVM version. You see that I have 1.1.9, right? That's my NVM version that I have here. And if I do something like NVM install latest, or just latest, like this, it's going to give me a really weird error. Seriously. Right? And the reason for this is because it needs the latest version of NVM for it to work. So I'm going to do the same process that you would do if you were installing it for Windows. I'm going to go here, and if you scroll down for Windows, here's the latest installer. If you're a Windows person, right? Again, this course, we could do either one or the other. Here's my version 1.11, right? Here's what's changed. And you can see that there's an executable here for Windows. For those Windows users, it makes this much easier to do. So save. In order for me to do this, I need to close down my command lines. I also need to close down Visual Studio Code because it has a command line that's built into it. Sometimes I ask you to do that. Close down Visual Studio Code when you're updating your terminal or command line. Because if you don't, the terminal that's built into Visual Studio Code is an instance and it won't be updated. Okay, so close down all those things. And now that I've downloaded that, when I update my NVM, it's going to ask me to accept, and it's going to override the stuff that I had before. It's very, very simple. It says, hey, I found a node version. Do you want me to manage it? Yes. And I'm just going to say yes, yes, and it's going to do its magic. For Windows users, this is a beautiful thing, because the last thing you want is for a difficult installation for Windows. Mac users, you're going to find that it's pretty simple, or you should find this pretty simple. Now, when I run it again, I can check to see what version it is, NVM version, and you can see that now I'm at 1.11, which is pretty good. And now I can do that thing. I can say NVM install latest. And if I did this, it's going to install 20.1.0. And the beautiful thing about this is once it's installed everything, you can see it's downloading everything, extracting it into my system. Then what I can simply use is I can say NVM use 20.1.0, and with some permissions, it's going to allow me to do that. And if I now type in node minus version, you can see now I'm at version 20. That's how beautiful it is. Why is this good? Man, what a headache it would be if I got you to do this every single time. Every course that you ever do, imagine if they always asked you to download the latest version of Node, uninstalling your stuff, then the previous stuff you had wouldn't work. Man, it's bad. Here's something else we can do. If I do an MVM list, you can see that I have a previous version that's 19.1.0. I'm going to uninstall that. I can say NVM uninstall 19.0, and it's going to just uninstall that. Done. It's gone from my system. Clean, right? That's what I want you guys to be able to do with your Mac. Please check it out. See if you can do it now. Yep.
Quick question. What is the latest NVM version you're getting?
1.11, 1.1.11.
Okay,
So it
when I
might be
ran the
different for you because that's the Windows version, right? So yours
Okay.
might be a different version because you're using this one, right?
I'm using Max. I used curl command to run it, and I'm getting my version as 0.39.3.
Yeah, it's a different version because it's the Mac version. Right? So
Okay.
that's the one you want to use, but you should be able to do that, same thing.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay. So now that we have all that installed, and hopefully you're either doing this at home or you're doing it here with me. Now we can do some other stuff with Node. I'm just going to go back to the terminal or command prompt here, and I want to add in a few packages for Node. Okay. Here's the first package for Node. I'm going to do an npm install yarn -g. Yeah, -g means global. Thank you. And install yarn. I use yarn for for a lot of the stuff. Do you guys use yarn in a previous course? Yay, awesome. Down press enter. And it's going to install yarn globally. I need to do these installs again because it's a fresh version of Node, right? I want to also do an npm install TypeScript -g, which is going to put the latest version of TypeScript, which is, I believe, 5, on your system, right? And then I'm going to do npm install nodemon -g. Nodemon, not always required. After version 18 or 16, you don't need to use nodemon anymore. You guys use nodemon before? You don't need to use it anymore. It's built into Node, but I like to use it because the built-in stuff kind of works and kind of doesn't sometimes. At least the last version I used. And then the final version is npm install express-generator -g, right? Which is our starting point for Express, if we're going to do that. Okay, those are the 4 installations that we have, and I did it through command line, and I'm doing this because it's all we need to get going on our API. Okay. Hopefully you guys are all with me on this one. I've installed yarn, TypeScript, nodemon, and express generator. If you want to know the sequence, it's here in the PowerPoint slides. So on the PowerPoint slides, I kind of say that exact thing. I say that like way over here too. Here. These are the ones. Yarn, TypeScript, nodemon, express generator. So we're going to be using Node. We're going to be using Express, and we're going to set up our project so that it uses everything else that we want.
Is Express and Express Generator is different thing?
Express Generator is a different thing. Express Generator is a no npm module that allows me to scaffold out an application from scratch. Like, so it does like a whole application from scratch, right? So instead of us doing like Express, like one line at a time, it adds a bunch of stuff in there. Now we're going to modify that. We modify it to hell anyway, right? But it kind of is a quick way of generating some code, which is what we're going to do today. We're going to make it, just let's test it to see if it works, kind of thing, okay? And then we'll talk about how to TypeScriptify it, right? Which is what we want to do, because we want to use TypeScript with everything.
I never use TypeScript.
You never use TypeScript?
Only JavaScript.
Now you're going to love TypeScript after this. Yeah. All right, so hopefully you've done all that tool setup. And again, all I've done is exactly what I've done here. The PowerPoint slides really support all that stuff, whether you want to use it or not. You can see that there's ways of doing it through Homebrew, right? Which is another way of installing stuff from MDM. Let's do a short JavaScript demo, and this is the stuff that I want you guys to do with your in-class exercise. Let's pull up Visual Studio Code again. And Visual Studio Code this time has my folder. What I want instead of this is now I just want to pull in my the single folder I want to work on, which is in-class exercise 1 into this. So it's going to make that the main folder. I have my git keep file, but I'm not going to use it, right? And what I want to do is we're going to start with basic JavaScript. I'm going to go on and do more JavaScript next week, but I want to talk about some JavaScript things with you. Basically, before Node, we needed an index.html file, right? Without an index.html file, we couldn't do anything, right? And for today, we're going to have it just for demo purposes. We're going to remove it very soon, okay? But I just want to put it in. So let's put that in. I'm going to click here, and I'm going to add in index.html. Because we're using a Visual Studio Code, we can use something called Emmet, which is a shortcut for adding in HTML. If I type HTML:5, you guys done this before? Yeah. Wonderful. And I press Tab, it gives you this little thing right at the top. Nice, nice, nice. And then up here in the document, we're just going to call this MDEV1004, and then we'll say ICE1. Okay, that's the title of the file. We might have, at some point, some kind of CSS. If we were going to make a regular app, your CSS would go here. Okay, this is where I put my CSS typically. And a lot of times when we build in our JavaScript stuff, our JavaScript goes down here. This is where normally it goes, all right? So I'm saying this because this is typical, but it's not wrong to put JavaScript up here too, right? Sometimes people do things at the top or the bottom. Okay, back to your knowledge. Why JavaScript at the top? Why JavaScript at the bottom? Why would I do that? If you were going to get a question on an interview, what's the difference?
JavaScript at the bottom is used, so you want your HTML and CSS to load as quickly as possible so that user can start interacting, and then JavaScript will be the one that adds additional code to it, like adds interactivity or those things to it.
Because
So
JavaScript can be blocking, right? JavaScript can be blocking, and if you want to do some weird, changes to your site, as an example, right? Let's say, for example, I want to do some changes to. I have my page, and I want to use JavaScript to do something like weird, like where I want to modify the page with JavaScript. Page can't be modified until it's loaded. So we wait till the page is loaded, and then we do the JavaScript. Right? But there's ways around that. And let's add a JavaScript file really quickly to this. I'm going to make a new folder. Typically, what I like to do is all my folders on the front end, I use a scripts folder. All right, in the scripts folder, I'm going to put in a new file, which is going to be called app.js. We're going to keep it JS for a second. And typically what I like to do with my JS is use an iffy. What's an iffy? Okay, new stuff. An iffy.
It's an abbreviation. I do not know what it is. If
Stands for immediately invoked function expression. That's what it stands for, which is like, AKA, it's also known as self-executing function, all right? Or a lambda expression. Some people call this like a lambda, JavaScript's version of a lambda expression, okay? So the way it would execute is you put it in brackets, right? And then you have some kind of function, right, that would be executed at the end. So something like this, so that your files would be executed at the end. Your whole thing would be put in here. If you don't know what an if is, or you forget, remember that in TypeScript, if I go to typescriptlang.org, right, this is why TypeScript is an amazing tool, typescriptlang.org, right? If you go there, you know that you have a playground you can go to, right? You guys have used the playground before, right? Here's an example of where I have a namespace of objects, right? And I have a person object. You might have seen something like this before, a person object, right? And at the right, you're going to see what it spits out with old ECMAScript 5. It looks like this, right? Well, actually, this is ECMAScript 6. But notice this part right here, where you have brackets, function, and then you have this kind of structure right here. That's your IFI. So the IFI is actually like this. It goes bracket, right? Function, right? Curly braces, and then like this. That's your IFI. It's weird, right? When you're looking at it, it's like, wait, that's like, you know, voodoo magic. What the heck is this doing? Well, let's think about what this is. The brackets, this bracket, the first yellow brackets here to here, think about this as an anonymous function, an unnamed function altogether, right? And this part right here is a calling feature. I'm calling the anonymous function, this function. This is calling this function itself, right? The inner function that's right here, this inner function here, I'm just gonna put this on different lines here. This is a closure, right? So this function here is something you can pass stuff into. If I pass something in here, in these brackets, it actually passes it in here, in these brackets. It's like a way of me taking you know, some function or value or whatever and passing it into the closure. That's what it does. This is a closure. Why do I use a closure with JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript? Because, my friends, the browser is a massive cache and it's global. Everything in the browser is a global cache on the front end. So I always like to enclose everything in an IFI, right? It prevents people from accessing my variables and my functions in the global cache, unless I want them to. So here I want to have a new function. And my function is going to be called start. Okay, and I'm going to have a little event handler. And I want to wait till the thing loads. And when I'm done loading it, I want to call the start function. What I've demonstrated here is something called event handling, right? So window is the window object. The window object is the browser loading. That's what it represents, right? Add event listener is a function. And what we're doing is we're using the observer pattern. We talked about patterns earlier today. We're using the observer pattern. We're creating an event listener and an event handler. This is the event listener. It's the load event. The load event, there's many types of events that can happen on a page, right? When the load event occurs, we can say that a callback function is triggered. The callback function can be either inline, right? Or it could be a named function like start. So start then is the callback function that's going to be activated when the load feature, when we finish loading the page. When the page is finished loading, the start function will activate, will be triggered, right? Here, we're just going to make a little console log. That's going to say, we'll say app started. Okay, old school. Now, sure, we've added this app.js, but this app.js is not connected in any way to our index.html, right? So we need to connect it, and I'm going to put it here at the bottom for extra protection. I'm going to say something like script source, and we're going to say /scripts / app.js. Okay, that's the first thing. So this little script here is going to connect my app.js file to my JavaScript, to my HTML file. Okay, and my HTML file is going to be pretty empty. Let's make an h1 tag. Let's make an h1 tag that says hello world, because we're doing our hello world function here. There it is. And now I want to test it. We're going to use NodeMon for this. But we can't use NodeMon because NodeMon is for Node. We need another NPM module to test a live server. Did you guys use any other NPM modules, like Light Server, HTTP server, anything like that? Let's make one, all right? So we're going to use another NPM module. We're going to say npm install light-server -g. Okay, light server -g should install. If it fails, and if you're using a Windows machine, a lot of times you need to use administrative rights, right? You may also be asked to use sudo if you didn't install npm or node properly on your Mac, all right? But it should now work. You should have installed light server, yeah? Now I can simply do light-server here on the terminal window, and it should launch my default web browser. Here's my default web browser. And if I look at, if I press Command or Control-Shift-J, right, it'll bring up my console window, right? And my console window should say app started. Are you with me? So what happened here? How did this work, right? One thing to know is back to what we talked about with an API, request response. Our little light server is a little node server, actually, is what it is, that we downloaded from NPM, right? So what happened is the user accessed the web page. This web page here is at localhost 3000, that's the port. And we made a request to the server, and it came back and returned a response. The response is the web page that we see today. The web page was interpreted. Each line was, the browser went through each line of the web page and installed anything like scripts or CSS or whatever, even interpreted the markup, the HTML. And then from there, it activated the script, which is our app.js, which what I made it do was do a console out, which it did right here. You guys good?
Yeah.
Okay. Nice. You can see here what you get a bit of this. You might get a 404 because it's also looking for a favicon. A favicon is just a special icon that appears at the top of your HTML pages. That's what this does. Yay, isn't this awesome? Right? But it doesn't do much. Let's talk about the 3 different types of functions that you can get. This is kind of our first JavaScript review. We're going to do more JavaScript review next week because you need to get up to speed with all the stuff. I want to make sure you guys are on the same page. This is one function. This is the named function type. What's another way you can write this function? There's 3 different ways. Oh, huh?
A lambda function.
Okay. How would I write that? Help me out.
Syntax.
Got the syntax. How would you write it out? I want to make another function a different way, not this way.
Create a
Did you learn it this way or did you
variable.
learn it? Sorry, say that again.
Create a variable name like const start is equal to and
Cons.
bracket.
Yeah, I like cons. Here's what I
Cons.
want you guys to never use. Yeah, I know. Here's what I want you guys to never use. Never use var. I never want to see var at all in any of your code. Why? Review.
Var is
Why?
variable. The values can change. It can change anytime. Const is like
I want to use, there's a special word I'm looking for in an interview. What's that word?
let.
That is a good word, but why is var bad? What does var do? Do you guys know? Right?
Initialize as a variable.
No, that's not what it does. What var does is it does something called hoisting. Oh yeah, this is a new thing, right? So if I define something with the var, any variable, any function, whatever, it takes that function or variable and hoists it to the top of the code every single time. It makes it a global variable, no matter where it is. If it's in a for loop and you put var, it takes that variable and puts it at the top of the code, right? That means for loops are unsafe afterwards, right? You can have all kinds of bugs with var. So we're going to get another piece of code in a bit. You're going to see a bunch of vars. We're going to convert them all to lets or consts. That's what we want, number 1. So no vars in my code. If I see vars from you guys, mark lost. I'm telling you first day. No vars. Const or let, number 1. Let's use let. We can use const too. And I'm just going to rewrite this function. I just wanted to put it in. I'm just going to comment it out. Let's write the same function. And we'll say let start equal to, and I want to make it so that it is a function. So how do I do the function syntax?
Throw bracket.
And that's one way. That's another way. Can I use this? Can I do that? Is that a thing? Is that valid?
No.
What am I missing here? Are you sure this is not valid? What if I did console log? Let's see. Let's check this out. Console log. I'll say app started. You said this is not valid. right? Okay, if I hover over start, what do I get? Looks like it might work. Let's see if it works. Save. And if I go back to my code, right? So if I go and look at my my browser, and if I refresh, app started. We're still good.
Huh. Okay, I don't know that.
So this is version 2 of my function. All right. Version 3. So this is number 2. So this is that function type 1, which is named functions. Right? Function type 2, which is anonymous functions. Pointed to by a variable or constant. Okay? Maybe variable or constant, no problem. Function type 3, let start equal to brackets. Is that good? This is the latest version of the function, right, that you might see somewhere else. This is function type 3, which is a lambda expression, right? Or we want to call them arrow functions, right? Now, there are differences between all three. And I'm pointing this out to you because when you do node programming, you're going to be like, wait, but Tom, I put it in a function. And I'm going to say, which type? And if you did it this way, function type 2, not function type 3, right? And I'm naming them. This is my naming convention, okay? There is no like JavaScript type 1, type 2, type 3. I'm telling you this is my type 3. Type 3, what does type 3 do? Does anyone know what type 3 do compared to type 2?
I think it has this along with that.
Correct.
So it has
this,
context.
The context gets passed into the function. So that can be a problem because if I don't want the lexical this to be passed into the function, then I want to use this one, all right? This type. If I want the lexical this to be passed into the function, I use this one. Both are equivalent most of the time, but sometimes you'll see me do this. In node programming, these are almost interchangeable, and the slight differences can cause you to have a bug. All right, just letting you know. So again, the lexical this is passed into the second function, this one right here, which means that we know this is in here. Like if I say something like, this dot whatever, it's in here, okay? Whereas this one doesn't have this. This is a closure that refers only this is where this is. This lives in just in this closure here, right? Where if I put this in here, it means all of this, right? So be careful. So here again, you would do the same thing, console log, we'll say app started. And just to differentiate this, we'll say type 3, and we'll say this one is type 2, and this one will be type 1. Okay, now, I want all of these functions to work all at the same time, but first let's see if type 3 works. So save.
One comes up with an error.
Okay, let's see what happens. And refresh, and you can see type 3 is right there. What's the error that you get?
Expected brackets.
Okay.
Yeah, I got my bracket.
Oh, here's something else I want to ask you. Do you need semicolons? Should you use semicolons?
No.
Yes. Yes, use semicolons, guys. Right? Because yes, you can get off without using semicolons. No, you shouldn't do that. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm one of the other school, which says, I know there's extra syntax, but it makes sense to me, and I know when a line ends, right? I can't be fooled when a line ends, right? If you don't use semicolons, sometimes it's weird. You're like, wait, there's no semicolon. Maybe it's because it makes me feel comfortable. I'm not programming in Python here, guys. I'm programming in JavaScript. I'll pull this away for a second. Okay, so it still doesn't work for you?
Yeah, it's weird.
It should work, okay?
Oh, I trust you. I know it's probably just a bracket or something.
So let's do this. Let's make another function then, right? We'll call it And we'll make it so that's the other type. We'll say function start all. And we'll call all the other functions inside of it. We'll call this one, we call start one. This one will be called start two. This one will be called start three. And we'll call the start all function here. Okay, and this one we can check to see when everything starts. So I'm just going to kind of do one of these. And I'm going to do one of those. Now I have all three functions available to me, and start all is going to call start one, start two, and start three. Question, will it happen in order? Will it happen in order? Will this happen in the order that I put?
No.
Why not?
The answer is never depend on functions, firing off in the order that you put them. The browser is a fickle thing. It's going to do whatever it wants and run functions whenever it feels like. So do not depend on the order that it's going to run in. Let's see what happens when I did this. Probably it's going to be okay because we don't have a lot going on. But let's see what happens if I call start all. Does it run all of them? And if I go back to my browser, you can see that type 1, type 2, type 3 is called in order, right? One thing to note is the fickle nature of AJAX and asynchronous code. In the future, we're going to be dealing with a lot of asynchronous code. And one thing to note is you can never tell when the browser or the server is going to respond with that code. You cannot depend on it to do it in a specific order. It's going to give you back the code whenever it feels like it. Okay, please keep that in mind. I'm going to answer you sometimes. You're going to say, Tom, I don't know why, but it doesn't work exactly like how yours does. And I'm going to say it's probably because of the asynchronous nature of JavaScript. That's going to be my answer to you. Okay. And then I'm going to go check you out, and I'm going to look at your code, and we're going to look at my code to be exactly the same. And then your code is going to trigger a little bit differently than mine because of the asynchronous nature of JavaScript. Please don't get upset about it. Okay, but that also can promote a problem. Here's the problem with the asynchronous nature of JavaScript. If you're loading code from a data source and you expect it to load at a certain time, right? You might be getting nothing. Your Android app might have nothing in there, right? And why? Because you're expecting it to load because you sent the request, but the request hasn't finished loading yet. And if you expect it to load at a certain time, it may not have, and you're going to get a null or nothing in there. It's going to be like undefined where you're going to try and do something, right? So be careful, be aware of that. All right, this is great. So we've loaded all three. You can see that all three functions work the exact same way, right? All the same one. This is why we're doing this. Oops, wrong one. That's why we're doing this this example to show you that all three of these types of functions are completely viable, right? And the most common one that you're going to see in old JavaScript is this one. All null node is going to be, you're going to look at it like this. So what is this really? You're making an identifier, that's what this is, and the identifier is pointing to the reference that is represented by the function in memory. I create a function in memory, which is anonymous, and I'm pointing to it. It's actually a pointer, old C++. I'm pointing to it. And so because everything in JavaScript is an object, right? I'm pointing to an object reference. So start two actually points to that object in memory. That's what it does. Okay, that's how this works. Okay, and so does start three. Start three does the exact same thing, except that because I'm using a fat arrow function, fat arrow functions allow the lexical vis to be passed into it. That's the difference between the two. Okay, for the most part. This one doesn't do that at all. This one is a named function. And the way it works is it's a local function, where if I hover over this one, take a look at the difference. This is a lambda function, just like this one. It looks like the same thing. Notice the return type that it says right here. The return is void, because in JavaScript, there are no types. Even if you use TypeScript, which we're going to do in a second, there are no types in JavaScript. Don't be fooled by it. Even if you define a type in TypeScript, it means nothing on the back end. Everything is public, regardless if you make it private or not, and everything is, a var in your mind when you translate it, That's what it comes down to, okay? And everything, there's no types. All right, so cool. So this is the first version of our code, and it's in JavaScript. But we don't want to use JavaScript in this course. We want to use TypeScript, and this is the intro that I want you guys to kind of do. So here in my app.js, let's rename the app.js to an app.ts, please. So we rename it with F2, right? We can say app.ts. Okay, now it's non-functional because our browser does not know anything about TS, right? We need to transpile. In order for us to make a TypeScript version of our code, we need to have a tsconfig.json file. Let's add that in. So right click, add a new file, which is tsconfig.json. Our tsconfig.json file is the configuration file we need for TypeScript. If we don't have this, whether it's for Express or whether it's for front-end framework, it's not going to work. Okay? We're going to put in some brackets, and we're going to press Control Space or Command Space on the Mac. And what we want is compiler options to come up. In compiler options, there are a few options you want to set up with TypeScript. And by the way, for people who've never used TypeScript before, right? You never used TypeScript before, right? TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. We're going to go into this more next week. We're going to do more about TypeScript, okay? But I want you to think about TypeScript is syntactic sugar or wrapper around JavaScript to give types, virtual types if you think about them, not real types. But it gives us, which is why I use TypeScript, faster coding in many ways, and it gives me errors. I want errors because if I don't get errors, JavaScript won't complain. I can write things in Node and it won't complain. And I'm like, what's wrong? I don't know what's wrong. It's not connected. I have no idea why. TypeScript's like, nope, it's red. This is wrong. It's not connecting here. The path is wrong. And I want that when I'm coding in Node.js. I want errors. I want good tooling. That's why I use TypeScript. No other reason. Not because it doesn't make it any easier or anything else like that. So compiler options is one, and I want to tell it a couple things. One of them is I want to tell it the module type. There are 3 types of modules that are common, right? One of them is common.js. The other one is something like Node, which we're going to see, all right? And for today, because we're not using, and there's also system, I'm going to use common.js here, okay? That's the module pattern that I'm going to be using, the module resolution pattern. And the other one is, when we look down here, let's take a look at some of these other configuration options, okay? So there's a ton of them, as you can see, right? So there is, map root and module detection and module resolution and a bunch of other crazy stuff that's in here. And if you don't know what any of these mean right now, it's totally fine. You don't have to worry about it. But you can see that next one I want to use is source map. So source maps, I want to use as true, right? Source maps allow us to use TypeScript, and for TypeScript to point when you're in your console, it points at the error in the TypeScript file, not the JavaScript file. Okay, so that's module resolution and source maps. Next, what else is there? What else do we need for people who've done TypeScript before? We're missing one more, the basic one, right? So if you look through here, inline sources, JSX, maproot, module resolution, right? And we say plugins and pretty and strict. I'm going to come back to strict in a second, right? Types and watch file, and that's it. So what am I missing? So module is one, but I want to convert it. I want to target, right? So if you look down, like what am I converting this to, right? So if I go back down here, you can see that there is an option that's here. That's target. See that target option? Target is something where I want to define the target, right? So do I want to convert this to, is backwards compatible with ECMAScript 3? That's crazy. That's like back in, what should we call it, Internet Explorer days, right? Or do I want to make it ECMAScript 5 or ECMAScript 6 or ECMAScript 2021 or 2022 or 2023, right? Let's make it so that it's ECMAScript 2023, the latest version, okay? So that's what we're targeting here. Let's reorganize things. Typically what I like to do is I like to put module first, then target, and then source map. Right, that's what I like to do. But you can certainly put it in any order, it doesn't matter.
Professor, Could you just summarize this once again?
Sure.
Module targets and source nodes. I just bit confused with this.
Okay, so let me so the module basically tells us the module pattern. Module is like, how do I connect things together? How do I take one JavaScript file and connect it to another JavaScript file? What's the module pattern that I use, right? Am I using ECMAScript 2022? Am I using ECMAScript 2023? What am I doing? CommonJS is the old module pattern. That's the old one. And let's just go ECMAScript 5 for now, just to make sure it's equal. ECMAScript 5. It's giving me an error. It says, set the JavaScript language version emitted and include library. And it says, no quick fixes available. Don't worry about what it says right now. Save. Right? Save. ECMAScript 5. We're going to keep it at that for now. Okay? Let's look at the difference. Now that I have a tsconfig.json file, I need to transpile. Okay? I need to transpile. Here's the way we can do it. All right? In Visual Studio Code, Control-Shift-B. If you're a Mac, Command-Shift-B. Try it. Control-Shift-B or Command-Shift-B on a Mac. Right? And if you did things properly, it's going to build up this little window. Did you get the little window? Command-Shift-B or Control-Shift-B. Did you get it? Yes? Yeah. Good. I'm going to click Watch, the Watch task, right? And what this is going to do is it's going to transpile my app.ts. Here's my app.ts, and it's going to create an app.js. Here's my app.js. Take a look what it did. It changed my let to a var, right? That's the transpiled version. This is the emitted version. This is the TypeScript version that we made together, right? All I did was change the ending to TypeScript, right? And then it converted this to this. You have this. Are you with me? Did it work for you?
No, I got lost. Hold on.
No problem. Sorry, I know I'm going fast.
I don't know what
What was that?
I'm talking. Very quick.
Sorry. I know this is the way.
This is the way.
That's right.
So
So
the
yeah.
TS file is transcompiled to app.
transpile.
Transpiled to
JS.
transpiled, right?
Yeah. And JS file is loaded here. This is the JS file. You know, your Chrome browser and your Node.js files we're going to have later on, they know nothing about TS. All they know is about JS, right? So we must transpile. That's the thing that's going to happen.
You said Command
Shift B.
B.
Yeah.
When I do that, I get the thing at the top of the screen, right?
What does it say?
CMake build, CMake template build task, CMake clean rebuild. It's like a list in a little bar.
Right. So what I did was if I do Control Shift B, for me, I get this, right? So what I want to do is I want to build a task, right? Now, let's say you don't get this. You got this?
Yeah, I see the J. So I picked the one that says build
Watch.
JSON.
Watch. Watch the JSON.
Okay.
Watch, basically what it does is it looks at any changes and retranspiles every time, right?
So it'll do it by itself.
Yeah. However, let's say you don't have this or your Visual Studio Code is bugged or something else. You can do it by hand. So here's how you do it by hand. Two things. Once you do this, let's control backtick here for a second. Notice I have two tasks running here. Look, I have the terminal task and I have this other task, right?
Yes.
This is my transpile task. This is not this task. I'm just going to control C this task and let's just delete it. So no, I don't have that transpile task anymore, right? I want to do it by hand. I just add another terminal window. So I'm going to just add another terminal window in here and I can simply type TSC minus W and that'll also do it. Okay, so whatever works for you. TSC minus W or Control Shift B, Command Shift B on a Mac, you're good to go. So why am I showing you this? Because the two main problems that we have when using TypeScript with Node or something else is, Professor, I don't know why, but my code doesn't work. And then I'm going to say, did you transpile? If you didn't transpile, the stuff that you changed never got changed, and so therefore it doesn't work, right? Because it's the old code. It only looks at JavaScript. It doesn't look at TypeScript, right? So you must transpile, and that's why we do this automatically. We always have the watch task running so we can transpile.
Basically, like whenever we change it, TypeScript file, it will automatically change the JavaScript file.
It'll automatically transpile. It'll retranspile. So here's an example, right? So my app.ts right now has those three functions, right? But I only want to have one function. By the way, take a look at some of this stuff, right? Let's start is equal to function, right? And I want that function to return something. I want to indicate app.ts that it returns void. This is how you do it, colon and the return type, right? And I can do the same thing with this one. I can say returns void, right? And I can probably do the same thing with this one, but it's not required because this one returns void because it automatically detects it. One thing that's amazing on this, if I hover over, right now, it doesn't really show me much. Take a look. It doesn't really show me much, but I can add in some comments. Here's some comments that you can add in. If I want to add in comments to the first one, I can put in / and you need an extension for this on Visual Studio Code. If you go double tap, I can use an extension called document this. And what document this could add, you could add a little kind of comment here on top of your files. It says something like, this function demonstrates functions or type 1 functions in JavaScript, type 1 functions in JavaScript. Okay? If I was to put this thing in here now, and if I hover over start, it gives me that at the bottom. So you can actually code your functions this way. We're going to do this a lot in when we use Node, right? So the way to get this is to get something called document this. If you look at my extensions, please look at document this. Right? Here's document this. Please download and install this extension on your Visual Studio Code. It allows you to type in / with two asterisks, and it allows you to document your application, right? It even picks up things like variables and other things inside of your function signature. Okay? I know these are little tricky things, but you're going to ask me later on, so I'm telling you now, so you know. All right, so that is your app.ts, and let's suppose I make a change, and I wipe away all of these functions, right? And I only want to do that one function again. Instead of start all, I want to use start, right? So I want to call it start. What does TypeScript do? TypeScript says there is no start. Look, it's giving me an error, right? You won't get this error in JavaScript at all. It'll go, okay, sure. And you'll be like, but I told it was supposed to start, but there is no start. It's start 1, start 2, or start 3. If I put in start 1, right? So if I go in and put in start 1 here, it's going to go, no problem. I can see start 1, right? No problem. And if I hover over it, it's going to tell me the little information about start 1 that I put in there, right? If I press save now, as soon as I press save, see that up here in Visual Studio Code, how it has a little dot? That means it's not saved. Here's another thing I'm going to say to you. Did you save? Because if you didn't save, it can't transpile because it doesn't detect that you change anything, right? So save, please. And when you do, it automatically transpiles into this, right? Into my app.js. App.js has been changed because take a look down here, it's automatically been changed. Okay? These are really small nuances with TypeScript, but I want you guys to understand that this is a source of potential errors and bugs in your code, and that's what I'm talking about. So for your, for your in-class exercise, this is all fine and good for a demonstration of JavaScript, but this is what I want you guys to do for your in-class exercise. This is for you to do. All right, it's pretty easy to do. I want you to use the express generator, okay? I want you to use the express generator. Let's stop light server, okay? So again, I'm going to go here and stop light server, and I'm going to stop this thing altogether. So all the servers are stopped. I'm going to stop my my Chrome browser for a second. Chrome browser stopped, right, and everything else. I want to use express generator. And if I look at the express generator here, express generator, if you actually look up what express generator is, it's under the express site. We're going to talk about this more next week. Okay, we already did this step. Take a look. When we add express generator, what we want to do is we can specify the type of front-end engine, okay? By the way, we can also specify no engine. We don't want a view engine at all. In our example, we don't want a view engine. We don't want express to be our view engine. We're making an API. But for today, let's make it so that we use EJS, right? So the way it would work is we add in express and then minus E for EJS, and then the name of the folder. We need to do this, right? We need to do this from the folder above this one. Okay, let's go back here into Visual Studio Code. All right, so I'm just going to clear this up. And I'm going to go one step up. CD space dot dot. CD space dot dot moves one step up to the containing folder, right? Just a command line thing. It means change directory, okay? What I want to do is I want to say express minus E, and I want to give it the exact name of my in-class exercise folder, which is MDEV1004-M2023-ICE 2023-ICE1. Okay, that's what I wanted to do. What this is going to do is it's going to say, hold on a second, Tom. You got stuff in here. Are you sure you want to do this? It's destructive. And you know what I'm going to say? Yeah, go ahead. Let's do it. So I'm going to press enter. It's going to say warning, right? Do you want to use this? And it says, by the way, it has been renamed to minus view is equal to EJS. I'm okay with that. Do I want to continue with the destination? Yes. And it's going to scaffold out all kinds of stuff. Take a look at all the stuff it gave me just now, right? It kept my index.html. That's nice, right? This is my little play area. We played together to get today. We said, hi guys, we're at the very low baby level when we did this thing. Okay, this is the baby level. All right, and then we have this app.js, right? This app.js, and we're going to translate this next week into an app.ts. So for extra credit for you guys, for yourself, what if? Can you try on your own between this week and next week? Again, there's no, if you can't do it, let's just run this the way it is. This is your in-class exercise for today, all right? I just want to run this with the way this is, and I want to run this with NodeMon. But before I do that, I need to do an npm install, right? So I'm going to go back into my folder, MDEV, right, 1004, and then ICE1, and I want to run an npm install. npm install will install all the modules that I need because npm uses something called node modules. It follows the package.json file that came with the express generator. These are all the things that it came with from the express generator, okay? Now, a couple things to note. All of these are old. And next week when we get into it, we're going to change all this stuff so it's the latest version, right? We're going to add TypeScript so that it works with TypeScript, the latest version. We're going to get rid of all the vars and change them into lets or consts, right? And we're going to change all the routing so that uses lets or consts. That's what we're going to do next week, okay? But this is kind of a review. It should be a review of what you've already done. To test this function, now all we need to do is at the bottom, and this is part of your in-class exercise. When you demonstrate it working with NodeMon, right? And you should get something that looks like this. Okay? If it gives you an error, if it says cannot get or something weird like that, remember that you need to do it in the containing folder for your in-class exercise, not the other folder, not the one that contains all the in-class exercises. It must be in the right folder, which is this one. Okay, that's number one. Then we can run a browser, any browser, and we can just do localhost 3000. And when you do, you should get this. Okay, so this is running our first Express application. This should be a review of everything you've done up until this point with Express and Node. If you haven't done this so far, it's okay, because we're going to continue to do more of this stuff. This is your in-class exercise. So when you demonstrate your in-class exercise, guys, I want you to put this up on GitHub. We didn't do that. Let's do this now. So now let's add this to GitHub. We're going to say git add dot. Here it is, adding everything, including all the NPM files. We're going to change this in the future, in a future iteration. Git commit minus M, and we're going to say installed express generator. So really, you need at least 2 commits here. All right, and then we're going to do a git push. Now, if you don't like this, do a commit and use a tool. It doesn't matter to me, right? But up online now, what you should see is, this is the key. If I go back online, if I refresh, you're going to see that inside of MDEV ICE, you can see that I have my latest commit, 2 commits, right? And if I look in there, I have all these files, right? That's what you should see. All these files are inside of my in-class exercise now. Why? Because I pushed it up to GitHub, right? They are inside of my MDEV1004 ICE1 folder. So I have my containing folder for all my ICEs, right? And this first ICE inside of there is all this stuff. This is for you to get full marks. And say, hey, here's my GitHub. And by the way, you can see when I run nodemon, which is what I want you to demonstrate, I get this. Okay? Show me that. If you can do that, 4% of your final grade. Nice and easy.
Professor, quick
He
question.
does a couple things. Yep.
Just to summarize, for the in-class assignment, I need to push all my code, what is done in class, to my repository, give you access, and
Please.
make a recording. Make a recording
Make a recording. Yep.
showing all what I've done, including.
Give me a link to your GitHub.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Gotcha. A link to a GitHub
And now you might
recording.
think, yeah. And you might think this is really crazy what I'm getting you to do, but actually there's an underlying motive for me. You made a video, done a GitHub repository, and you've played a little bit with TypeScript and JavaScript, right? And you've done a little bit of Express all in one day. Wonderful. That's awesome. You guys are awesome if you can do this today for 4% of your final grade. And I think it's pretty straightforward. Questions before we go for the day? All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me on my craziness today. We're going to do more crazy stuff every week. And I'll see you guys next week. Please ping me on Discord if you have a problem between now and Sunday. It's due Sunday at midnight. All right, thanks so much.